Hello, my name is David Nolan, and I'm the host of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. Today, I'm talking with Bobby Jaegers, a member of the Academy's Cyber Risk Task Force. Bobby, welcome to Actuary Voices.
Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk to you during Cyber Risk Month, but what I'd like to do at the beginning, if you don't mind, is try and get a sense of who you are and what your journey towards becoming an actuary looked like. Tell us a little bit about your personal background.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in a small town in the middle of Missouri, and all throughout high school, I loved math, and I took calculus and statistics during high school. And a lot of my friends, they were also taking those classes, and they all were becoming engineers. And I went up to one of my teachers and I said, I don't want to be an engineer. Everyone else is. I go, but what should I do? And she goes, well, you should look into being an actuary. And I had the same response that everybody else has. And what the heck's an actuary, right? So she goes, well, take a look into it. And so I did some research, and I really liked what I was seeing. You know, the idea of taking exams, being able to progress along the career path to kind of advance yourself. And then, you know, being able to take statistics, calculus all throughout college, I thought was a great idea. So I went to school at Maryville University of St. Louis, got my degree in actuarial science with minors in business administration and history for some reason. And during those classes, I took VBA programming class, which I really enjoyed. Growing up, I enjoyed learning how computers worked and programming and stuff like that. So in college, doing VBA work was something that really interested me, and like really being able to program and understand how to make the computer almost work for you in that way. So whenever I was in college, my junior year, my son was born. And so I was looking for a job closer to home, and I actually got a job doing some IT consulting work. And I did that for a couple of years out of college. And then I finally got a job in the actuarial field a couple of years out of college. And I was doing pricing for personal lines, a business for a regional insurer. And then a couple of years after that, I got into consulting, and I've been doing consulting engagements, you know, with regulators and, you know, developing predictive analytics models. So, you know, kind of got a whole wide breadth of the actuarial profession. It's been a joy ever since I got into it. So, yeah, I've loved it ever since I got into it.
That's very refreshing to hear. And I've got to say that you were very fortunate that your high school teacher knew about the actuarial profession, because that is not always the case, I understand.
Yeah, I think I got lucky because there was someone in my high school a couple years before me who went into it before I did. So he kind of paved the way for me. I haven't kept up with him since, but I'd be curious to see how he's doing now.
And did you take exams while you were in university, or did you wait till you finished?
So I took 2 exams while I was in university. I passed P and FM while I was at school. And then I took a break from the exams while I was doing IT consulting, but I was still studying for them. I just wasn't actually taking them. Like, I was still trying to understand the ideas of it. I remember looking at the financial economics text while I was doing some IT consulting work at that time. And I'm like, this is still just fascinating stuff to me. So I just knew I wanted to get back into it in some way, shape, or form.
And your consulting career, does that take you on a lot of travel, or are you able to do that locally?
Not really. You know, I started my consulting career for a smaller company. This was even prior to COVID. So at that point, I thought that I was going to have to do more travel. But then, you know, COVID came along, and it kind of almost took a lot of that travel and brought it to a halt. So really, I haven't had to do much travel at all on the consulting side of things. So I love traveling, but I haven't had to do as much for work.
Yeah, there's an odd mix, because I know several consultants who just travel all the time. And every time you see them, they got a different background. Either it's a different hotel room, conference room, and then others like yourself can get gigs that allows you to stay close to home. You know, if you got school-age kids, that's helpful too.
Yeah, for sure. My son absolutely keeps me busy. So
So you say you love your work, which is great. But what do you find particularly fulfilling about its impact?
yeah, I really enjoy, you know, especially on the consulting side of things, being able to help people solve business problems, you know, and being able to use those things that I talked about earlier, the predictive analytics, the statistics, being able to use those types of skills and being able to help influence businesses, managers to make those decisions. So I really enjoy whenever I get some data from a client, and, you know, it may not be the most cleanest of data, but, you know, being able to get that data, start working through it, starting to understand what problems that company faces, and then being able to create this analysis, and then you get to go and present it to them and be like, this is what we're seeing. This is what you can do to help yourself out. And I really enjoy that helping aspect of it.
It's hilarious. I just finished reviewing a letter literally 15 minutes ago from one of our committees to the NAIC about missing data in data sets and whether you needed to intervene or whether you could make a judgment call about whether there was enough data to make a final decision or not. It's obviously a big deal.
Yeah. In some of my committee work, they're actually talking about that as well. So yeah, that's become a very interesting topic as of late.
It's fascinating that as data becomes more ubiquitous and there's more and more of it, potentially the more problems we're spotting in the data that we're getting. Maybe it's because we're becoming more demanding of the data because it's informing an awful lot of decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. It's either that or, what I kind of seen sometimes is there's conversion issues. So like, going from one system to another, you may not have the same set of data that you had prior, or you have different encoding, different business rules going into that newer data that you wouldn't have had prior. So trying to make sense of all that, it's a fun task. It's a interesting task.
And then you love it when you spot this really odd quirk and you figure out a solution to it.
Absolutely.
Though conversely, I guess sometimes you're kicking yourself because you might have missed something. Have you ever faced any professional challenges that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. My first internship, actually, I did it with Humana whenever I was a junior in college. And I got asked to do a task. It was basically updating some code. And I was told to update every single one of these functions with this one line of code. And I get done with it and I show it to my manager. And his first words were, "Oh no," because I followed exactly what he said, but he goes, "I made a mistake and should not have updated all of them, just the small set." And the email that I got from the IT department there was less than pleased. So I went back through and I was able to roll them all back pretty quickly. So that was a fun one. And, just more recently in the consulting area, whenever I first started consulting, being able to communicate some of these more complex ideas with predictive analytics, machine learning models, it was kind of tough to kind of be speaking the same language as seasoned actuaries who had developed these models, who had been in them and working on them for quite a while. So it's become kind of a growing opportunity for me to be able to learn those communication skills, being able to talk and be able to basically get on the same level as them and present ideas to them to help them get to the same level that we're at.
You're, I guess, fortunate, I presume, that program, that code wasn't made public, because sometimes products are launched and a little coding error has snuck in and nobody noticed until too late.
That's always the benefit, right? You test it first and then you go to present it. And every time you go to present it, it fails. I was actually giving a presentation 2 weeks ago at the Central States Actuarial Forum over an AI case study. And I tested it the day before on the exact system we were using, and then we went to give the presentation, and sure enough, the demo that I had prepared failed. Had a good contingency plan on it, but it's just how it always works, right?
Yep. Tech is wonderful until it doesn't work.
That's right.
Or it doesn't work the way you want it to work. Okay. We are talking in mid-October, which is the annual month set aside for Cyber Risk Awareness Month. And you're on the Academy's Cyber Risk Task Force. I was wondering if you would like to share a little bit about the challenges you're trying to overcome.
Yeah, the Cyber Risk Task Force, what we do is, we look at the attacks that are happening to businesses and how they are impacting individuals as well. And we look at the impacts to the insurance industry as well from these attacks. So basically, mitigation techniques for these businesses, for the individuals, and we look at how those businesses can, better protect themselves, and what kind of insurance offerings are out there to be able to remediate some of this damage that these cyber attacks cause.
Sure. And obviously that affects all areas of business. It's not just a casualty issue. You're the guys who are trying to price the risk associated with it all. There have been some pretty serious breaches recently. We'll remember the Change Health one from 18 months ago. And every day, if you open the business page of your local newspaper, if you're fortunate enough to have a business page or indeed a local newspaper, you'll see either threats or successful cyber hacks. We're obviously seeing a proliferation of this. Do you think there is a way to curtail their spread?
I I did a paper about personal cyber insurance not too long ago. It's part of the cyber risk toolkit that the Academy puts out. And I think one of the things that I came across whenever I was writing that paper was that there's no way to 100% be away from cyber attacks. You can't completely 100% mitigate those risks unless that is you go live off the grid with no cell phone and nobody's doing that in this day and age. So you can't really 100% mitigate those risks, but you can take small incremental steps to help yourself. If you're at home, you can make sure that you're using Windows Defender or some kind of anti-malware, antivirus type of software. You can make sure that you're using strong passwords. And, if you get an email that seems too good to be true, don't go clicking on links. It's almost a little bit of common sense, but, with AI and stuff like that, these attacks are becoming so advanced and so hard to be able to discern what's real and what's not. It's actually becoming a lot more difficult. I just saw a post the other day. I can't remember if it was on Reddit or where it was, but there was a phishing scheme. It looked like it was from a Microsoft email account, but instead of the M in Microsoft.com from the email, it was an R and an N that was very closely pushed together. So without being very scrupulous and really looking at every letter of an email, people are going to fall for that. So there are these more advanced type of techniques that are coming. You just got to stay aware, kind of stay vigilant, and almost approach most emails with a hint of skepticism of, is this true? Is this something that is real?
Sure. I won't forget, we had a new executive director start a couple plus years ago here at the Academy. On his first day in the office, the entire staff got a phishing email asking them to buy gift cards from the new executive director. Almost his first email with his staff was, "That wasn't me. I will never ask you to buy a gift card."
Yeah, we had something similar happen just the other day. It was the day that we run payroll, and I get an email from, luckily it was an ex-employee, and it was a faked email asking to change their direct deposit location. So, it was incredible timing that it was on the day that we were running payroll, but it was still like too close to for comfort. It was very well done, very smart email. So, you got to stay vigilant. You got to stay very aware of the possibility of those types of attacks.
Let me take a moment to remind listeners that you're listening to Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries. On this podcast, we talk to Academy volunteers and leaders, as well as friends of the Academy, about what inspires them about their work, both professionally or as a friend of or volunteer with the Academy. Please subscribe to Actuary Voices on your preferred podcast platform. And now, back to my conversation with Bobby Jaegers, a member of the Academy's Cyber Risk Task Force. Let's talk about insurance on that front, because I believe there are personal cyber insurance policies, which I personally have not got, unless it's rolled into my house insurance, which I doubt very much. But can you tell us a little bit about those and how they might differ from the larger policies for businesses?
Yeah, so it's going to be kind of a matter of what exactly is covered and how much is covered, right? So with your bigger business policies, there's going to be a little bit more that is covered just because they have that infrastructure there to be able to prevent those cyber attacks, right? And what we would generally see is that those personal insurance policies are going to be a lot lower in severity. And what we generally would see too is there's going to be a lot more non-reporting of an individual cyber policy, right? So say you have some sort of ransomware that gets on your computer, well, you might go get that fixed. You might just go have some IT professional come in and fix that on your computer. And why would you report that? It's going to be a $100 or so type of fix, maybe a couple $100, and then you fix, you're back on your way. So these smaller personal cyber policies will be very beneficial to those with like larger assets. So like larger crypto assets, or a would-be hacker would try to get to your bank accounts. It's kind of comes down to how secure do you personally feel like you want to be? So on an individual side, it kind of comes down a lot to risk tolerance and how secure do you want to be. On the business side of things, though, you have these very large companies, and it's going to kind of come down to the same thing of what kind of data do you handle, right? There are various levels of cybersecurity that you could employ at your company. And, there's very much different levels. For example, if you're handling financial information or medical records, you probably have to pass like a SOC 2 analysis or a SOC 2 audit just to be able to do that. So I think whenever, there's a business cyber attack, they have to be reported. So there's a lot more onus on a business to actually report compared to a individual who doesn't necessarily have to report. There's a lot difference there between that business and that personal cyber policy.
Yeah, but individuals can buy policies, as you say, depending on their risk tolerance and what kind of data they might want to be trying to protect. Because I look at my computer, my personal computer, and it says, apart from some photos of my kids, there's not really much on there. I guess my tax returns, but they're on TurboTax as well.
Right.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about what individuals can do about being vigilant. And you mentioned one or two different tools that you can purchase for your computer. Apart from those two options, are there any other sort of things that individuals should be thinking about?
You can buy a couple of different personal cyber insurance policies. There's the one that is basically an endorsement to your homeowner's policy. Some companies offer this. You can just call up your insurer and they will basically write this policy as an add-on endorsement to your homeowner's policy. And it kind of varies by the amount of insurance that you want, kind of similar to your homeowner's policy where, you can increase limits and whatnot. And then there are also standalone cyber policies. So these are policies that will offer a lot broader range of coverage than those endorsement policies. They might be a little bit more expensive, kind of depending on the types of coverage that you get and kind of, a few other underwriting criteria that may not be the same under a homeowner's policy. So they'll offer a broader range of coverage to protect you and kind of reimburse you just in case, you have some ransomware that, you have to go get professionally removed from your computer. You get some kind of money stolen from your bank account or something. So those types of policies will be able to help reimburse you in those instances.
Sure. And does the rise of cryptocurrencies introduce another wrinkle to this issue?
In a sense, yes. I've heard a lot of, and what I've researched about and seen is a lot of these ransomware and the cyber extortion type of attacks, they actually look for cryptocurrency in return for something. So for example, in a ransomware attack, your computer will be completely taken over by a would-be attacker, and then they will ask for cryptocurrency in exchange. That's just so that the actual payment can't be tracked from one person to another. It's kind of more of an anonymized payment. And the same thing goes for like a cyber extortion type of incident where, the attacker will say, oh, we have these embarrassing pictures of you from this date. Pay us this amount or we're going to leak those. So, and normally all of those exchanges are done through cryptocurrency. So I think the rise in cryptocurrency has kind of made it more expensive to get those ransomwares and those cyber extortions if they were to be paid. But a lot of the times those, like a cyber extortion is probably a false threat, or, for a ransomware, you could just have an IT professional remove that from your computer. So cryptocurrency does play an impact in it, but I don't think it would necessarily cause the number of cyber attacks to increase or decrease. Just maybe the severity of them might change a little bit.
If the way that they got access to your bank account, they got access to your crypto, then that, I imagine, might be an expensive loss.
Absolutely.
My favorite story is a guy, I think he was in Wales, and his partner was cleaning the house and spotted an old hard drive, and it ended up in a landfill. And he has spent the last 3 or 4 years trying to get the local council to allow him to dig up the landfill to find the hard drive.
I wish him luck on that. Yeah, that's it might be worth the investment then, right?
Yes. Oh yeah. No, he has obviously made that judgment and says, yes, and getting this hard drive back is worth it, even if it does cost a lot of excavation fees. Are there any other cyber issues you'd like to raise before we move on?
It's kind of like I talked about before, if you just stay vigilant, if you see an email that's just way too good to be true, or it just doesn't seem right, by all means, check the links in the email, check the links on the website, and make sure that they're going to a trusted source. Just be vigilant, be aware, and yeah, you can be safe. And if you get something at work that looks too good to be true, report it to your IT department and they'll be able to validate it for you or be able to help you out with it.
Yeah, one of the things I've seen is that most email clients, if you hover over a link, it'll actually show you what the URL is. And you can often see that it's going somewhere very different than it suggests from the text that is in front of your eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And with AI becoming more and more prevalent, we see more deep fakes with emails, with phone calls. People will be using AI to impersonate people's voices to be able to kind of get more personal information out of you, and the more you share on social media apps, they can start building a profile about you. So, you be aware of what you're posting online, who's calling you, and just be very aware.
Well, I'd like to go a little bit broader now, because obviously we've been talking about challenges to individuals and to businesses. But let's look at the actuarial profession. And do you see any challenges and opportunities in the future for the profession?
So going back to my last answer, AI has been a real hotbed topic, and not only the actuarial profession, but just, business as a whole. But, AI poses a big threat for cybersecurity, like we just talked about with deepfakes and stuff like that. Emails that look way too good or way too real looking to most people. And, AI in the actual profession has been kind of tough because it's very much like a black box. In some of my consulting engagements, I've worked for regulators. And just as much as, a GLM or any other machine learning model was kind of, a black box several years ago, AI is just as much, if not more, than a black box than those. So regulatory understanding of these AI models and how they're going to be used within like rating or reserving is going to be a very tough hill to overcome in the near future. So I think there's a lot of cool ideas being proposed out there. I think there's a lot of interesting use cases, but being able to prove that, your AI model isn't creating biased results is going to be a very, very challenging hill.
Well, Bobby, we're coming close to the end of our time together. I always like to ask people what they do for fun, but I can see from your background that you might have some basketball in your life.
Yeah. I played basketball all growing up, and then my son, he's gotten really big into it. Whenever I was picking him up from daycare, whenever we were younger, he would always ask me if we can go to the YMCA and play basketball afterwards. Then whenever he got into about fourth grade, I got roped into coaching, and I coached him ever since then. And up until he got to eighth grade. And he's a sophomore in high school now. So I was unfortunately relieved of my duties in eighth grade. So I enjoyed it. It's fun. Had a ton of great memories from coaching. Would do it again in a heartbeat, but I think there are a bunch of refs out there who are more than happy that I retired from coaching.
Oh, I see. Okay, well, I trust you're one of those good parents on the sideline.
Oh yeah, now that I'm retired, I'm great on the sideline.
Okay, well, on that note, Bobby, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, David.
You've been listening to my conversation with Bobby Jaegers, a member of the Academy's Cyber Risk Task Force. My name is David Nolan, and I'm the host of Actuary Voices, the podcast from the American Academy of Actuaries, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. Please visit our website, actuary.org, for a wealth of information about the work that the Academy does. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn as well. And, of course, please subscribe to this podcast on your preferred podcast platform.